Hi friends, happy Tuesday. Happy for those of you in the US, and I think some of you in the UK overseas, you had a long weekend or a holiday weekend. So happy holiday weekend to those of you who were experiencing that. For those of you who are in the service, thank you for the service you provide our country. It always feels really important. I think sometimes with dates like Memorial Day, if you're not in the US, we had Memorial Day yesterday. I think sometimes it's easy to forget that's what the holiday is about. So thank you for your service. You'll have to let me know if you enjoyed the long weekend, what you did, or if you were more like me. I'm really notoriously bad at knowing when holidays are coming up. My team, it's sort of their job to let me know so that they know what days they want off. My schedule gets booked out sometimes in advance, so oftentimes I have client calls. So unless I've booked a trip, which we didn't for this holiday, COVID and that sort of thing, we just had my mom in town. I'm sort of like, don't know what day of the week it is half the time because I work from home, I have my own business, and we're not paying attention to that stuff. So it was really funny. A few weeks before this holiday, a couple of my team took off, and I was like, oh, it's a holiday. No idea at all. So I enjoyed a half day yesterday, took a few client calls, and then had a lovely half day, but completely was out of the loop until the day came apart. So those are like, hashtag working from home problems, but not really a problem. I enjoyed the day very much. So you all have to let me know if that happens to you as well, or if you enjoyed the day off, what you all did this weekend. And then let's dive into today's topic. If you're live, say hi. If you're watching on the replay as well, always love to hear who's here, who's with me. Always so grateful to have you here with me. So today's conversation and topic, this is something I have been chatting with clients about quite a bit recently, and it's something I've had to pay attention to in my business as well. So I figured it would be a really good conversation to bring to you. We're basically gonna be talking about content and repurposing. I'll just let the cat out of the bag, but I want to share some things that come up around it because I want to talk about content and the importance of keeping your content going and putting it out in the world to sustain your business and for your scalability, and then how to leverage your content in terms of repurposing so you're able to sustain your success as you're growing without fucking burning out, but also so you're able to scale. Because what I find so often as you are growing your business and getting into a place, getting ready to scale, what used to work for you with your content, what you used to do isn't always sustainable. And oftentimes your business is going to require something a little different from you, but your audience, the sustainability in your business still requires you to show up and to continue marketing. So we're gonna break that down a little bit. I'm gonna share my mindset, the way I personally think about repurposing content. I find it's really fascinating and super normal. I have stuff come up around it as well, but I find it really fascinating how repurposing content can kick up some things for entrepreneurs. So feel free to share if something comes up for you around repurposing content. I'd love to hear from everyone if there is, what that is for you. Super normal. And then we will also dive into just, hey, nice to have you live, Marie, nice to have you here. And then we will also dive into some practical tips and tools for repurposing. So I know in the past we've done a live more for how to leverage your content and turn it into other things, turning a blog post into an ebook into a blog post. We've talked about that in the past. Today I want to talk about this more from a mindset of how can you use your content to stay consistent when you don't necessarily have bandwidth to stay consistent, so you can do other things in your business to scale. So we're going to talk about repurposing a little bit differently, and I'll just give you some really practical tips and what that looks like in my business and what I've suggested for some of my clients, so you can take that and apply that to your business. And as always, throw questions at me, reflections, all the things. I love having a conversation. I don't want this to be one-sided. This is for you. So if you do have a question that is coming up around the repurposing stuff or content things, let me know. So I think what's helpful for us to start with in this conversation is just kind of laying the groundwork with content and the importance of consistency. If you have been here for a hot second with me, if you're a client of mine, I preach the power of consistency and the power of content. Content and consistency has built my business, mindset as well. Obviously, I believe mindset is 99% of all of it. It's the gasoline, it's the fuel that is really allowing our rocket ship to take off and to coast into space. However, part of that action, the forward facing action that gives you that momentum that allows you to build, grow, and scale a profitable business. So much of that is found in your consistency and in your content. So obviously content is not the only marketing strategy. It is not the only tool. I do have some clients who aren't necessarily leveraging content. So this is not a conversation to say this is the thing you have to do. But for most of us in the online space, content is going to be a really powerful marketing tool that allows you to start new relationships, build new relationships, deepen those relationships, nurture them, take someone who is in air quotes, cold member of your audience, or someone who's cold and has never been introduced to your work before, and to warm them up. Personally, don't love that terminology. But so we're speaking the same lingo, because I know that's probably language that gets thrown around in marketing land quite a bit. So you can turn someone into a hot lead. But really what we're talking about when we talk about cold, warm, hot, we're talking about relationship building. We're talking about how do you get in front of someone new? How do you start a new relationship? How do you deepen that relationship with them? How do you build that know, like, and trust so that they understand what it is you do, how you can help someone solve their problems, how you can help them get what they want, and what is on the other side of working with you or investing in your product or service, what's in it for that person. And really powerful way to do this and to build those relationships. Your business is built on your relationships. The money in your business is directly tied to the depth of your relationships. I mean, like, side tangent here, but I remember when I was in the acting world, one of my frustrations was I always felt like if I just knew more people, I mean, this is a little bit of a story, but I definitely thought if I knew more people, that would open more doors, because I was so acutely aware of the power of relationships. And when you leverage relationships in a really beautiful, reciprocal way, that can open doors. And I knew how true that was in the acting world. And I saw when I did build more relationships, that led to auditions, that led to booking films. The film I did in South Africa, where I spent 7 weeks there on a game reserve, such an amazing experience. That was a direct result of first building relationships that got me an audition for that opportunity. Relationships really are the core of the profit and sustainability in your business, and content and sharing content consistently is such a powerful way to start and build those relationships. And so I think sometimes we think of content as, I know because I hear the resistance from clients, it can feel like a lot of work, or it can feel like a chore, or it can feel like, does this really work? Or, I mean, you'll have to tell me if you have any noise in the brain come up around that. And so I just want to, before we dive into the repurposing piece, I really want to preface with, content absolutely works. It still works, yes, even with the algorithm changing. It's a really powerful marketing tool because of the relationship building aspect, because of that know, like, and trust aspect. It's also something that's been around for a really long time. We just share content in a new way online than we used to offline. And it is really, really powerful. And I'll use myself as an example. It's what's allowed me to get and stay fully booked. I've been fully booked for years. It's what allows me to make consistent multi-5-figure months in my business in cash. It's what allows me to continue to scale my business. We've added 100K every year for the last few years, cash received or more. A lot of that is directly tied to the power of consistently sharing content and the compound effect of that. What I find happens, and I think most of us can get on board with that. We can agree with that. Like, content is powerful. If you're a client of mine, I'm like lovingly always nudging you to be consistent. And if you're not, I'm always lovingly nudging you to make sure you are consistent. And we talk a lot about content, and not just the strategy and topics, but getting out there consistently because it's so powerful. What I find happens a lot is, for most of us, we understand this. And for most entrepreneurs, they can get into a good rhythm of like, I'm being consistent with my content, and it's starting to work. And then what happens for a lot of business owners is it starts to work and they start to get fully booked or sell out a group program, or, if it's selling a product, they start to sell out in a really good way, sell out their product or service. They start to make more money, and there is more energy or effort for them required to run the business, to serve clients. And what can happen, and if you are a client of mine, I lovingly push on this as well. What can so often happen is we take the foot off the gas in terms of showing up consistently through content. And it becomes this is when we see so many of the big ebbs and flows in business. What happens is the marketing is no longer consistent. The relationship building is no longer consistent. And if we think about relationship building, think about what it's like if you have a friend, or if you have an acquaintance or someone who's like all hot, or dating someone who's like all hot and heavy, and they're like messaging you all the time, or they like have phone calls with you all the time, they want to hang out all the time, and then they kind of ghost for 3 months. and then you don't hear from them again until they need something from you. Anyone ever have a friend like that or ever been in a relationship like that? This is a horrible example, but for anyone who has ever known someone like this or been in a dating relationship like this, anyone ever dated someone where it's like they're just all hot and heavy when they want to get some from you, and then as soon as they have, you don't hear from them for a while, and then they only message late at night when they want to Netflix and chill again? You know what I'm talking about here. If anyone has ever been on the receiving end of that, how does that feel? Not so great, right? And I think what happens unintentionally in business, hey Laura, nice to have you, heart you. What happens so often and what I see so often in business unintentionally, we're talking about if you are here, you're heart-centered, you're passion-driven. I know if anything, this happens because you care so much about the clients in front of you, or because you have too much on your plate and there isn't enough delegation happening, or because life is happening, because life always continues to happen as you're running a business and you're moving, or your kid's sick, or there's something going on personally for you that you have to navigate or process. I think anytime business owners are dropping the ball on consistency and they're not marketing consistently, it's not because they're a bad business owner or they don't want to, or because not anyone in this group, or because they want to be the equivalent of the not so great dating example where you're only messaging when you want to get some. I know no one here is doing that, but what happens unintentionally for business owners as they grow and more things get put onto their plate and there's more to navigate, it's really easy to take the foot off the gas pedal with marketing and with that consistency, and to create that gap in the relationship where it does start to feel a little like, to your audience, where, oh man, this person only shows up in my inbox, or only shows up on social media, or only shows up live, or only shows up with a podcast episode, whatever that is, only shows up to connect and to build this relationship when they want something from me, when they need to book a sale, or they're about to launch a product or a group program. That doesn't feel so great on the receiving end, and it can do I don't want to create stories, but it can, weaken that tie, that relationship that if you have been consistent for a while, that you were building with someone. I think if we think about relationships outside of business, it's more effort to build trust, and it's so easy to break trust. And so much of your sales and business, so much of the money in your business is directly tied to, yes, those relationships, but the trust in those relationships, right? That know, like, and trust, that trust factor is huge. That's the safety piece for people, where they feel safe enough to give you money, or to get on a phone call with you, or to look at your sales page, or to even open your email. Let me know if this is making sense, y'all. So want to explain why this happens, and also just to normalize. This isn't to create a story. If this has ever been you, like, you are not wrong. You're not doing it wrong. You're a human being running a business, being a human being running a business and not a robot, especially a small business where you don't have a staff of 100, a team of 100 supporting you. There's a lot of moving pieces, and I think this is a very, very normal thing. But I think the more we're aware of this, the easier it is to problem solve in advance and to know how to address it when it shows up. Because a lot of times, again, this is my gas pedal. Foot gets taken off the gas pedal and the marketing slows down. And so that creates a bit of a gap in the relationship. It also means then when you want to make sales in your business, to create that sustainability, or if you're looking to scale, it's kind of like you have to restart the wheel. And what is the law of physics? An object in rest stays in rest, an object in motion stays in motion. Anyone know what I'm talking about there? Generally speaking, it takes a lot more effort to go from inertia into motion, into action. And it requires a lot less action, or a lot less effort, energy, to keep an object in motion. And so if you stay in motion, stay consistent with your marketing, it's a lot easier to stay in motion in your business and to create that sustainability. If you stop that motion, the challenge starts to ripple out, because not only are you creating that gap with your audience, but it usually takes a little more to crank the wheel, right, up on your side to get back into motion again. I know, because I hear this from clients, if they have kind of taken a break from content, starting to put themselves out there all over again, or to get back into that like mode of creating content, like, oh man, this feels so challenging. Whereas when you're doing that regularly, it's kind of like going to the gym regularly. It's so much easier when you're in a routine than if you stop and start and you have to start all over again. I think y'all get what I'm saying. So I think one of the easiest things, and what I talk with clients about quite a bit, is really thinking about knowing this is the case and knowing how important it is to stay in motion, and knowing how important it is to keep that connection with your audience and to continually to allow for that compound effect. This is also what creates so much ease in business. I was chatting with a client, actually I've been chatting about quite a few of my clients. We've been talking about the repurposing piece, but also this ease piece. So much of the ease in business happens because of the compound effect, which is a result of being consistent, taking those consistent actions, showing up consistently with your content and your sales actions. That's when we bake in ease into our business, because what you find is things you did 3 months ago, 6 months ago, a year ago, 3 years ago, they start to pay dividends later. Seeds you planted and you kept watering consistently, you tend to have that tipping effect or that compound effect where all of a sudden they like, it's like dominoes that topple over, where you're like, wait, when did business get so easy? Where are all these clients? Where's all this money coming from? Part of that is it's kind of law. It's just how that happens when you are consistent over time. I'm trying not to like side tangent here, but I want to help everyone understand this concept, because I do find this really does sabotage a lot of businesses that are doing really well, and it keeps people from sustaining. It's right. It's where we get the ups and downs in business. It keeps people from sustaining their success and from allowing themselves to set themselves up for scalability. The other piece here I want to chat about, and then we're gonna talk mindset and the practical tips in a moment. But if you're in this place then, and this is where I think repurposing content can be really powerful, if you're in a place where the reason that you're having a hard time staying consistent with content is because you have grown, you are busier, you are serving more clients. There is, maybe your team is expanding, there are other things that are requiring your energy, you're getting ready to scale. What I find is sustainability is necessary as a foundation for scalability, but content creation and what you're putting out into the world also shifts a little bit so you can create space to scale. Something I tell my clients a lot is, if you want to scale, the whole idea of scaling is making more money without doing more work, right? Making more money without doing more work, which means we have to look at how are you not working more, but bringing in more money? What systems, what processes, what team, what offers, what do we need to have in place to allow that to happen? And that often means we also have to create space so that you can allow for, whether it's more clients or another program or more money or team or energy to spend on something else, to come in so you can focus on that to scale. Does that make sense? So a lot of times, if you want to create something new, if you want to scale, if you want to bring in more clients, more money, I always talk about how we need 2 kinds of space. We need the mental space and physical space. Space usually precedes next level results. So oftentimes these are like the opportunities for when we want to take a look at, okay, so I know if I want to sustain my business and my income and my results, and I want to set myself up to scale my income and my results, there's probably going to be a time when the way I have been doing things aren't going to continue to serve me, but my audience, my outside world, my marketing is still going to need the same things from me. So sort of like, what do we do here? And I think this is when repurposing your content, there's lots of times to repurpose content. There's lots of ways to repurpose content, like we were talking at the beginning of the live stream. But this is when you can really look at repurposing as a strategic part of sustainability and scalability, and start to use it very smartly, it's not a great way to say it, but strategically, as a way so you can really be thinking about, okay, I know this is what my business needs. Let me then create a plan, and let me allow this to be part of my strategy instead of just like a one-off thing I'm doing from time to time. Because I find with repurposing, because there can be, and we'll talk about the mindset around it in a second, but I find there can be so much resistance around it, so people don't lean into it. And if you're not leaning into it, it's definitely not something you have a process around, right? It's definitely not a part of your strategy. And I think what we want to shift is, how do we remove the resistance? So this can be something you have a process around that's literally a part of your strategy that you see as a part of sustainability and scalability. Let me know if that makes sense while I grab my water, or if y'all have questions. Also love to know from anyone if you want to share now or on the replay, if anything does come up for you, because we're going to pivot into the mindset piece in a moment. If anything does come up for you when you think about repurposing. Now, what we're talking about today, and I'll share some examples, but again, we're talking a little differently than the idea of like if I was going to repurpose a series of live streams into a course, that would be a one-time repurpose. That is an absolutely excellent way to repurpose content. We're also talking about something that's a little different than, I think I talked about this on the live stream where we talked about Clubhouse and what I think about Clubhouse. I'm always thinking about how can I leverage my content and share it or use it in at least 2 or 3 ways. So for example, if I go live here, we're going to be able to repurpose this content into written posts. It's going to get shared with my email list. It's going to go to my website. I'm leveraging my time because we're going to use this more than once. It's also going to stay in my group for all of you so you can watch it now or on the replay. That's also a form of repurposing content, but that's not what we're talking about today. I really want to invite you to start thinking about how can you use content you've already created as essentially an employee in your business, a team member in your business. Start to see it as collateral in your business that you can reuse, recycle months, a year, 2 years later. So you're not having to recreate the wheel and create as much new content. So you can free up brain space and that mental and physical space for scalability options, and so that you can open up that space to create higher level content, which I'll break down for you in a moment. Actually, I'll just break that down now because I think it's just easier while we're talking about it. What I think is, as you are getting into a place of scaling, so you're sustaining your business and you're looking at scaling, what I really believe to be true is, yes, consistency is still key and important, but when we're looking at things like content, I think the shift and focus goes from, I need to create all the content and I need to spend a lot of time focusing on those daily pieces of content, which are usually written posts, which are so valuable. And I think at the start of your business, oftentimes, if you can't do anything else, I would recommend you focus on those daily written posts, because that's where you start new relationships. That's where you start to deepen new relationships. People often don't have enough of a relationship with you yet to want to invest tons of time on higher level content if you only had time for one thing. As you have more time and as your business is growing, I often encourage clients to layer on top of that what I call higher level content where you're able to really show up and deepen a relationship with the people in front of you, to help them understand more what it's like to work with you, to understand more about your work. Something like this, a live stream, maybe a blog post, maybe an ebook, maybe it's something like my podcast would be that. Right? So we're layering these things up. As you're looking to sustain and scale, when we're looking at scaling, what I think becomes important is looking at, wait, my attention, my time is valuable. I don't have as much time to give around. I need to leverage my time. What I want to make sure I'm still doing is showing up with that higher level content to deepen those relationships. Because I think about this live stream here, this is so, like, me connecting with you, I also just love doing this, but it's really, really important. Like, this to me is the best way I can connect with you outside of actually getting on a phone call with you, that and my podcast, right? Like, those are 2 ways I can, like, you have a better idea and feel for who I am than in a written post. It's not to diminish the power of a written post. I love me some writing, but it's just going to speed up our chance to get to know one another. You can watch a live stream with me and you're gonna have a much better idea of me and my work and how I might be able to support you than reading a single post. Hopefully we're on the same page there. So what I always think about is staying consistent with continuing to create that new higher level content still remains important. But when your time is getting whittled down because you're getting ready to scale and you need to create space, and we don't want you to work more, right? Scaling is not about working more. It's about doing the same amount of work or sometimes less to make more money, but not at the expense of working more. We want to look at then, where can we leverage time? Where can we leverage content? In my opinion, and something I quite honestly have had my own resistance around, when we talk about the mindset piece, I'll share that, is I think the best place you can leverage your time and energy is looking at a lot of your written content, your daily posts, the collateral in your business you've been building for 6 months, a year, longer, and looking at that as, this is a great place for me to leverage my time and my energy, and to see written content, your daily social media posts, as a great opportunity of something to repurpose and to start to build that into your strategy consistently so that you can free up time and energy and space for either your scalability offer or option there, but also to continue to show up for that higher level content. So we're not getting rid of content creation altogether, but we're looking at how can we leverage content that's already been created as a way to free up time and space to focus on the higher level content, the higher level work in your business. It's sort of like when you're bringing on team in your business. A lot of times I'm talking about with clients around this is we're looking at using team as a way to support you in building your business and using team as a way to support you with those money generating activities you don't need to do so you can free up your time and energy to focus on the work only you can do. You still got to show up for that, but we want to look at what's your zone of genius, what's your higher level work. Same with content. So hopefully that concept makes sense. What I find, we'll talk about the mindset and I'll give you some practical tips there in a second. What I find for so many of us, myself included, is holy moly, resistance can come up around repurposing content. So again, y'all are very, very quiet today, unless sometimes I know I have comments and I don't know, but I think y'all are very quiet today. So you do not have to share if you've had resistance around content. But if anyone wants to share what comes up mindset-wise around the thought of repurposing content, not just as a one-off thing, but as a part of your strategy, as a part of your process, as a part of something you do consistently, love to hear what comes up for you. And for any of you who are like, no, I love it, I'm like all on board, I'd love to hear what your thought process is, your mindset around it. Because I'm going to offer a couple reframes here and I'll share the way I think about it. But a few of the most common things I hear for what we're talking about here, just repurposing content in general, I hear the concern of, what if people have seen this before? Like, aren't people gonna know I just posted this? Like aren't they gonna remember this? I think this is one of the biggest ones. It feels too easy. Like, it doesn't feel and I know that sounds crazy because I think for so many of us, we consciously want to create an easier in our business, but I think a lot of resistance can come up around like, wait, this feels really easy. I'm not working hard enough. I don't feel like I'm doing something in my business. I think there can also be a big mindset component that can come up around, wait, but this is the thing. This was one of mine for sure that I had to unpack. This is the thing that built my business. This is consistency, showing up with these posts. Like, this is what helped me to make money or to get fully booked or to launch out this group program. So if I stop doing that, or if I stop creating new forms of this, and if I'm not like in it so much, how am I gonna sustain my business? I for sure know that is a very, very common one. I know I had it, and I've heard that from so many clients. Another one I hear concern around is, what if it's stale or out to date? And then I think I bet a lot of you in this group will resonate with this. A lot of my clients are very in tune energetically, and I think sometimes there can be such a concern around not feeling like they're so energetically connected to the content, or feeling like they're, if you created a piece of content a year ago, feeling like my energy is not in that piece of content anymore. I think this is kind of not what we're talking about today, but I also know when some of this gets delegated out, it's almost like a whole nother live stream, but just the giving over, handing that over to someone else, the control, the like, only I can do this, I'm the one who does it better. I think a lot can come up for business owners. Most of us as business owners are a little bit on the want to control side, because that's why we started our own business. So I share that to normalize, but also so you can just start to like hear some of those and see, does any of that come up for me? Or maybe it's not that, but it's something else, because it's always so much more helpful to notice what the resistance is about so you can shift it instead of just, this wouldn't work for me, or like, I'm just gonna do this once, or I don't wanna do this, which I think is just kind of the default when we have resistance, or sometimes we just don't even open ourselves up to the idea of something as it being an option for us when we have that resistance. So I think it's helpful to notice, do you have any of those stories, those mindsets coming up around it? I'll address a few of them in the way and again, I've had some of these, I've had to unpack them too. I think it always makes me giggle a little bit, because I think repurposing is, in my mind, it's a pretty benign thing, but I'm just so fascinated about like things in business and what dirt they can kick up, which are generally about other things, as we all know. But I'll share a couple of reframes on really the mindset I take around this now in business, in case this is valuable for any of you, and a lot of times when I'm supporting clients around as well. So in terms of what if people have seen it before, I think this is just an easy one. This one has never bothered me as much because my thought is, most of the time people aren't gonna remember. I love to say when clients are worried about them, like, so what did I post last week in my Facebook group? Or like 3 weeks ago, what was I talking about on my Instagram stories when I do my bite-sized biz lessons? Or what did I send in my email last Friday or last Wednesday? And these are paying clients of mine. Usually they're like, I don't know. Sometimes someone will remember, but most of us get so much thrown at us. Most of us get so much thrown at us, we can't even remember what we consumed or what we read or what we saw just a few weeks ago, yet alone if it was something someone shared 6 months ago, a year ago, or 2 years ago. So I would offer, most likely people won't remember. And if they do, I always like to remember we learn through repetition. Most of us like to consume the same topics and ideas over and over again because we learn through repetition. I know I re-listen or reread books all the time. I know I also like to rewatch movies or re-consume things that are important to me because I get such a different take from it every time I read a book, for example. There's a new nuance, there's a new lesson. I also know my brain creates new neural pathways through repetition, and oftentimes I have to hear things a whole bunch of times before it really sinks in. And the further along I am in my journey, oftentimes the different things that are going to click then I wouldn't have even noticed a couple years ago. It's sort of like when kids watch the same movie you do, they don't always notice some of the innuendos because they're at a different place in their journey. The same thing for your audience with content. And if someone really, 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 really notices, my other thought process and mindset around it is great. That means they're really paying attention. That means they really like your work. That means your work is really clicking with them. It probably means this is just going to support them getting on a phone call with you, buying from you, investing from you, right? Anyone's content, anyone's book, anyone's movie, anyone's TV show that we're watching on repeat and that we're so acutely aware of what was said a week ago, that's because we're really invested. And oftentimes, if anything, that's just going to help further that relationship. So just some shifts there and some mindsets I would offer you around the thought process, the mindset around what if people have seen this or are they going to remember? In terms of it cheating or feeling too easy, I think there's so much to unpack there, so I'm mindful for us not to create a 4-hour live stream here. But I think what's just really interesting to notice, and I think for a lot of high achievers and society teaches hustle culture. Society teaches work hard equals money. I think society teaches a lot of this. I think for a lot of high achievers, many of us are also high functioning, trauma survivors or high functioning codependents or high functioning insert something, which is where our high achievement comes from. And a lot of us derive things like safety or avoidance or self-esteem from hard work. And again, I might just need to be a whole nother live stream we do. But I would just notice oftentimes when that's coming up, it's often because there's something else underneath that. And I think there's just really a beautiful opportunity there to notice why there's such resistance around allowing ease in your business or allowing something to feel easier, and where the story is, what's the story to unpack there around, why things have to be hard. This week's podcast episode, I sometimes forget because we record them in advance, but this week's podcast episode, we're actually talking about that path of least resistance and finding that easier way in business. So if anyone's interested in that, go check out the podcast from this week. So what I would just say is, again, bringing this back to the whole point of scaling, the whole idea of scaling in your business is how do you make more money without working more? It's not how do you work more money working more. That's not scaling. That's called burning out, or that's just called working more. Scaling, or that's called building your business maybe and growing your business, right? But scaling is how do you make more money without working more? So I would just invite you to think about this as this isn't even about working hard or about things being easy. This is about being a smart strategic business owner who's looking at how can I leverage the assets in my business? And I would really start to think about a piece of content as collateral, as an asset. and think of it as the same way you would think about if you're bringing on a team member that you're spending money for. You would think that's an asset in my business. Obviously, it's a beautiful human being that's supporting you, but that's also something you're spending money on to help you grow your business. And so if you're spending money on that, you would probably be thinking, how can I best leverage this money I'm spending and this person, their skill set, to help grow my business? I want to invite you to start thinking about your content the same way. It takes you time and energy to create a piece of content. You've already put in the hard work there, right? It's already created. Time and energy costs you money in your business. Your time is worth money, and it becomes increasingly worth more money. I mean, you're always worthy, but in terms of the value of your time as you're growing in business. And so we can literally think like that piece of content is like, it's valued at something. It also generates revenue, right? Every piece of content builds a relationship. Relationships build money in your business. So I really want to invite you to almost like change the thought process around this. And instead of like hard work, or it's too easy, think of a piece of content as this is an asset in my business. It took time and energy. It costs money to create that. How can I leverage my money? When I invest in my SAP account, which is my retirement account, some of you might have like a Roth IRA, or you might invest in the stock market. I'm not thinking, oh my gosh, if I get a really great return on that investment, if I leverage my money to make more money, man, that's too easy, that sucks. I'm thinking, where is the smartest place I can put my money to consistently to allow for the compound effect to get the best return on my money? How can I use my money as a resource to make more money? That's the shift I want to invite you to make here when you're thinking about your content. Think of it as, how can I use my assets? How can I leverage this to get a really great return on an investment? Repurposing is one way you do that. Repurposing is kind of like investing in the stock market. It's like a way to duplicate, right? Hopefully that example analogy makes sense. So I think that's just a way, I think, again, whole different conversation around the working hard and ease. And I think we can build us to another live around that. And we'll talk about that in the podcast more in this week's episode. Definitely listen to that. But I think this is a reframe in the mindset I take around that in repurposing content, I think can just be very, very valuable for you. So you're really treating your business like a business and looking at your content, because I think especially for us who are so attached to our work and who are so passion driven, I think sometimes we get so attached to the emotionality of our content, which is good, that's important. But I think we can also forget that it is a very strategic part of a marketing strategy, and that you are a CEO running a business that you want to sustain and scale, which means being smart and treating your business like a business and looking at how can I leverage my assets, right? So that might just help shift some of that there. And then in terms of what if this content is old or it's out of date? We do, when we repurpose content in my business, I absolutely, we're mindful not to reuse things that are something about Memorial Day, right? If I had a post about Memorial Day yesterday, we would not repurpose that on New Year's Day. But outside of that, outside of literally things that are time specific or, speaking to something specific going on in the world at the time. I wrote a post last year about the Super Bowl halftime performance. We wouldn't repurpose that piece of content. That would not actually, there wouldn't be a lot of context around that. But outside of that, my mindset around when that comes up and the way I think about this is something I have found to be true for myself and for so many of my clients is as you grow in business, you're on a journey. You are growing and evolving, especially if you're doing mindset work. You're growing and evolving as a human being. Excuse me, I just got something stuck in my throat, but you're growing and evolving as a human being. You're also growing and evolving as a business owner and in the work you do. Most of us, I've been in business a little over 5 years now. I was great at what I did 5 years ago, and I have absolutely grown and evolved as a business owner and a coach in the past 5 years. And what I find is really powerful about repurposing old content, and this is why I don't think content gets stale, I think it's so, so, so powerful and absolutely something to leverage. My mindset now, the way I think about things now is Kim in business with 5 years experience. Kim, who has a multi-six-figure business that's continuing to scale. Kim with a team. Kim, who's been fully booked for a few years, right? And the further I get away from Kim in her first year of business, who was I lovingly refer to on the struggle bus, and who had a, handful of clients, but who could barely afford to pay for her coach, and who could like barely afford to pay rent each month, and who was like stressed out all the time and, worried like, would this thing ever scale? The further I get away from that, the easier it is to forget what some of those challenges were, what some of was coming up around the mindset, some of the things I had to learn, some of the things that were really important that helped me and that helped my clients who were in, a similar space. And so I find when you repurpose your content, one of the biggest gifts you give yourself as a business owner, but also that you give your audience, is it's like a time capsule. You get to go back to what was important to you however long ago, what was important to your audience, what was your mindset and thought process around that. And yes, of course, sometimes our ideas evolve and we have a new lens to look through something, and that can be a way to repurpose content. But sometimes it's a really great way to still be able to meet your people where they're at, to be able to remember, oh, right, this was a challenge. This was something I needed support with. Let me speak to that, because of course people in my audience are going to need help with that too. And I think it can be a really powerful way to get into the mind of your audience, your people, the people you serve and support, and to remember what that's like and to really stay in touch with that. I'm blessed because I work all one-on-one or with one-on-one clients all day long. So I'm always getting to hear what's coming up for people, but especially for those of you who might have a group program or a membership model or a product, something where maybe you're not one-on-one on the phone with people all day long. Something like this can be such a helpful way to be like, oh, right, that's what it was like. Because most of us in the service providing industry space, my coaches, my OBMs, my VAs, my therapists, my accountants, my designers, a lot of us at one point when we started our business, it's because part of where the passion and our missions come from, oftentimes it's because we were teaching what we needed to know, right? We were a few steps ahead of the people we were supporting. So that content can be such a gold mine. So hopefully that makes sense, but that's my mindset around that in terms of like, is this gonna be stale, or like this might have been so old, or like, like that idea I had 5 years ago, like that must be so like outdated, or like, I don't know, like I know so much better now. I think, no, probably like that's actually the stuff I need to pay attention to and revisit. Probably the stuff I'm talking about now is interesting to me, but maybe not to anyone else. Or the things I'm thinking now might not be as interesting or as pertinent or as important. Those other topics are going to be either more pertinent or equally important or pertinent. So I think that can be just a helpful shift. That's the mindset I take around that like worry or fear that it's going to be stale or boring or old or outdated. Okay. Hopefully that makes sense. Let's see here. I'm just seeing if I had anything before I share a few practical tips with you. I always make these notes for y'all so I can feel very organized, and then I forget to look at them unless I do this. But I think everything we talked about was in my notes, and then it's always like my notes and then whatever we actually talk about. Hashtag real life. And I sound like I feel like you all know I'm a bonus mom. I sometimes feel like I'm like becoming like the stereotype of what we think about someone who is a bonus mom, where I'm like saying things like hashtag real life, because no one actually talks that way. Okay, I'm laughing at myself today. Okay, so let's talk practical tips. If anyone knows what I'm talking about, you can laugh with me. Let's talk practical tips. So with repurposing content, with what we're talking about today, again, there are different ways to repurpose content, lots of ways to repurpose your content. What we're really talking about today is looking at how can you leverage your content for that sustainability and scalability. So that specific way of repurposing, and starting to think about this just through this lens of if I'm in this place where I want to be able to create that space in my business, I want to keep showing up consistently, and I want to create space to scale, how can I still show up for that higher level content and still show up with that daily content I'm posting on social media, or what some of those things are, without having, how can I basically leverage those assets we were talking about without always having to recreate the wheel? So I'll share what we do in my business currently, but I'll also share just a couple practical tips or suggestions, some of the things I've suggested to clients, because your business might look different than mine. just for context, I really like to creating content for you all. Gifts is one of my love language. It's definitely one of my business love language. So I like, not that a piece of content is a gift, but like I like to give. Like it feels really good for me. Like when I created that free course for you, that was like, it actually was really fun for me. And it was a little selfish because I like to just make things and create things and share with you. So I shared that because I've had to find the difference of how do we repurpose, but how do I also get to like feel like I'm creating and like making and writing, because I don't want to give that up completely because I just enjoy it so much. Whereas other clients I have do not feel that way at all, so it looks a little different for them. So my invitation to you, because I'm obviously not talking to all of you one-on-one, think about how does this apply to my business, not you need to do it the same exact way I do it. But what we do is I've now got, we have content I've posted every day on social media for 5 years, so we have 5 years of content, but I think we have a good backlog of the past 3 years of content. So a lot of times what you're seeing in the Facebook group, what we do is I'm generally, for the most part, I'm creating anywhere between 1 to 3 new posts because I want to. And then my team is pulling past content that we are repurposing. And that is how we're leveraging past content and freeing up a ton of time. But that's also how we're using those assets to make sure, eyeballs are getting on that content. And for all the other, the benefits we talked about. Some weeks, and this is, I think I talked about in the email I sent, or if you read the blurb, I was talking about, when life happens, or, if we have a big project in the business, if I'm getting ready to do a training for y'all, something that's just, I have a heavier week with client calls, those kinds of weeks, sometimes like the last few weeks, we did all repurpose content from probably 2 years ago. And what I find so fascinating, and I share this with you because it's nice for me to see, to reframe this, but to reframe this for you. A lot of times that content, I find it does better the second or third time around than it did the first time around, which I just really find interesting. Just to speak to that mindset gremlin that can come up around like, it's not gonna be interesting the second time, or it's gonna get stale. I've really found the reverse to be true. So that's what that looks like in my business. In terms of team and in terms of a process, that looks like I have support in terms of we repurpose like this live stream or my bite-sized biz lessons on Instagram. If you see, I do 3 or 4 of those a week. We transcribe those when we repurpose them into written content. Generally speaking, that's also where those new posts are coming from. So the time for me is a lot less than creating 7 to 10 posts every week to put out. It's also such a nice, like if you're in the place of building your business and the start of business, I think it's something to start thinking about now. Where you're thinking about, if I'm gonna have a process for this later, then I wanna start thinking about this now in the way, in terms of like, how am I saving my content? How am I storing my content? I wish I had saved more of we could go back and like get the content from the first, year or 2 in business, but I didn't have a great process for saving it then. And if you're a client of mine, I'm like lovingly like, start doing this before you need it. And so if you're in that place where you're like, I don't have enough content to repurpose yet, I would argue that's probably not true. If you have a few months of content, if you have 3 months of content even, and you have a busy week, you have enough content to repurpose, go back to 3 months ago. Totally fair game to repurpose that. But I would also start think about your future business, do your future business, think about how do I build my business with scaling in mind, with sustainability in mind, and start thinking about just creating some systems and processes around how you organize and store your content with that in mind. So again, what that looks like in my business, that's generally, not that how many posts we're repurposing may matter, but just I think it's nice to hear like transparently what happens behind the scenes, because I think so often we're like, what do people do? Or how can someone have all those clients and a podcast and go live and do these things? This is how. I have team support, but I'm also not creating all new content all the time. I'm creating this new content all the time. And then, a handful of posts, and some weeks I'm not creating any, we're just pulling old content. The other thing, and I share this because I think this is going to be helpful for those of you who have teams, I'm also asking my team to support me with what we're pulling to repurpose. So I want to leverage that content, but I also want to make sure I'm leveraging my time. That's part of the reason for doing this, right? It's creating space. It's how do I not work more, but make more? And part of the way I don't work more and make more is I'm leveraging the incredible support. I have an amazing team. I love them so much. If they're probably not watching, but team, I love you. but I leverage my support. And so my support, they know we have a process for how we organize content. My OBM knows what we're looking for. She finds the content to repurpose. She finds the content we send to you in an email, right? She's finding, unless it's something specific I want or I don't have access to, she's finding that. So it's really helpful because that frees up a ton of time. So even if I'm only writing a few posts, I'm not then spending another half an hour. Because you know, if you're, I don't know, maybe this isn't you, if it were me, if I go looking for my old content to repurpose, I'm like down a rabbit hole. Then I like find another document. I'm like, oh, here's a fun idea. And then I want to create something. And then I've like found, it's like, I'm not going to be efficient with that. And then I'm like, oh, should I use this one or this one? It's really helpful this way. You just remove all of the opportunities for distraction and going down the rabbit holes and for decision fatigue and for starting 14 new projects you don't need to start. Delegate it to your team if you have a team. If you don't have a team yet, I would be systematic in terms of go back to a certain date and like just go through like in what's the word I'm looking for? Chronological order. I would just go through in chronological order to minimize that your brains want to like go down the rabbit hole or distract yourself or to like, should I use this one or this one or this one? I would invite you to do that unless, and this is something I remind clients, and this is something, if I were launching a mastermind next month, I'm not, but let's say I was, and it was a sales mastermind. Who knows, maybe in the future we will. What I would probably want to do instead of going in chronological order, I'd want to pull past content on sales. And I would ask my team to pull content on sales. So if you're, getting ready to launch a program and you're going to repurpose content, I would think about, if it were me, I would invite you to think about, do you have content that is aligned to, congruent to what it is you're launching? That would make the most sense to then repurpose and then to create some new content around as well, and definitely to focus your higher level content on. So that's our general process. What's really important to me, especially because, and some of you are probably like this, because of that energy piece, I do want to feel connected to my content. I want to feel connected to all of you. I love this group. I love what I do. I want to feel connected to my words. I like to write. I get last looks before we repurpose anything. So team sends it to me. I take last looks. I make any edits if I need to. If it's a post I don't want to share, we delete it and we pull something out. Sometimes, I feel like my writing style is differently, whatever, little edits. But I'm still leveraging my time and saving so much time by doing this, because that takes me, 10 minutes. It's such a small amount of time to go through a week or two, and I'm batching that with, other tasks and other things I'm reviewing from team. So this is how we're able to have so much content go out without me having to spend all of my time doing that. So the content can be consistent. There can be sustainability in my business. I don't feel like I'm fried and frazzled all the time, but then I can also have the energy to show up here, or to have the white space, the brain space, to come up with a new content idea, or, to record the podcast. I went for a run today in the middle of my workday, and that's something I share because I wouldn't be able to do that. And I'm working with clients all one-on-one, which is a very much that's a time, energy. I have to show up for calls. I have to be present. I wouldn't be able to support clients all day long, support them in Basecamp, create content, and go for a run in the middle of the day if I was constantly trying to create new and churn new. So I share that transparently because I think it's, whatever stage of business you're at, helpful to hear, but that's part of the thought process and then the really practical way we do it in my business. Now, for some of my clients, again, there's, different moving pieces in their businesses. There's different things coming up for them. Some of them, hate their creative process. Some of them, are about to have a baby or have kids or are going through, some big life stuff. When my dad was really sick, there was a lot of like, how do we just repurpose as much as possible? I don't want my hands in it. So sometimes, we're going through big life things. Some of them are, who are in different stages of their business might have, a job on the side. So there's limited time. So for those sorts of situations, a lot of times we're looking at how can we create big batches of content that you're leveraging from the past and create it in cycles that you can just rinse and repeat. So you always have that consistent, I'm trying to think of like what the opposite of higher level is, because I don't want to call it's the daily touch points, right? It's the equivalent of the text message with a friend. How can we have those daily text messages going out so that you're keeping that relationship consistent, so that when you get on the phone with them, with your friend, or when you go hang out with your friend, it's not like, who are you? We haven't talked in a year. So for some of those clients, we're, depending on how much content they've created, we're looking at, can we create a 90-day set of content that just gets recycled. I have a past client who has a very successful business and multi-million at this point, and she has her content and even her stories set on, I think it's a 90-day, it might be 180 days at this point, but it's essentially just a loop. It just gets recycled for her audience, and then as she has time, she creates new and adds new in, and so that loop kind of gets stretched out. So for some of my clients, that's what we're talking about. That's kind of the practical way we're looking at that. And then again, still looking at how can they still stay consistent with their higher level content, their dates, their, having that phone call with their friend in terms of going live, if that's what they do, or, for some of them, they do have a podcast, for some of them, they have blogs. It's different for everyone, but we're still looking at that piece, but we're trying to create as much ease and as much consistency. So it's not a thought process of, oh my gosh, what am I gonna post today? Or I know I could repurpose stuff, but what am I gonna repurpose? Or I don't know, like, how often should I do this? We're just making this, like, it's just a part of their process that they can add on to and layer onto. And then kind of the last situation I'll just speak to from a practical place. This happens for all of us in business. Even if you love the creative process, if you're like me, I love to create, I still have times where I'm like, I don't got any juice, right? I just don't, like, I've just been creating a lot, and I just don't have, a lot of creative energy. I'm such a big believer that for us to be able to have creative downloads, for us to be able to create, we do need that white space. We do need those times out. We need that unplugged time. We need that. It's why I go for runs for multiple reasons, but it's one of the reasons I go for runs, because it's where I get a lot of my ideas and it's part of my white space and my creative thought process, my creative downloads from. Just sort of like, you need space to scale. I really believe we need space for creative ideas to come in. Sometimes when we're just tapped out, like, it's sort of like the door is closed. The closed sign is on the door, and there might be 20 ideas sitting outside that door, but they just can't get in. And I think that's a really great time to look at, even if you don't want to have leveraging your content as a consistent part of your strategy right now, I highly recommend taking a week or two and repurposing as much as possible. And if you need to, repurpose an old podcast, instead you can repurpose podcast episodes or lives if you need a week off from that, or if you're sick, or for, my clients who, are going to have a baby or something like that and go on maternity leave. Sometimes we'll batch content out in advance, and we'll look at, like, how can we even repurpose the higher level content. You don't always have to be the one showing up to do that. But I highly recommend leveraging your content then absolutely to stay consistent, but giving yourself basically a little mini vacation from creation. It is amazing how as soon as you don't have to create, even before you create white space, like even if you don't go on your run or whatever your equivalent is, meditate, or I don't know, go watch a movie or read a book. Even if you don't do that, it is just so fascinating how as soon as you don't have to do something, and as soon as there isn't that pressure to create, the ideas come flooding in. But my invitation to you, and this is a little side tangent of what we're talking about today, but my invitation is, if you've given yourself like a 2-week vacation from creating content, I would really, really, really recommend letting yourself have that whole 2-week vacation from it and going through that repurposed content. Just make notes of your ideas, or create if you want to. Create because it feels good, but then save it for after that 2 weeks. It's sort of like if you go on an actual vacation, you kind of lose some of the benefits of the vacation if you're working kind of throughout it, or if you're kind of like, well, I'll kind of do my work, but I'll kind of rest. You kind of, at the end of your vacation, like, did I actually have a vacation, or did I actually work somewhere that just wasn't my home? So kind of the same thing here. To really get that benefit, so your brain can have those new ideas come in, and so you can allow for that creative flow to come back. Find that really, really valuable. Okay, I feel like I just looked at the time, like, how is this an hour? Y'all, thank you for hanging with me for an hour. One of my clients is like, Kim, can you give me the Cliff Notes version of these, because your lives are always an hour. Thank you for all of you who've been here for an hour. I appreciate you. I clearly had a lot to say about this, but I think it's really important stuff because it touches on so much of what we need to think about in business. It touches on the mindset, and how we do one thing is how we do all things when it comes to mindset. If it's showing up for you in repurposing, it's showing up elsewhere. This is just a lens it's going to show up through. It touches on things like our visibility. It touches on things like our marketing strategy, that consistency, how you do sustain your business, how you're growing your business, how you scale your business. So I think there's a lot here, those systems and processes, delegating, letting go of control. I think there's a lot here that can come up, even though when we hear something like repurposing, it's so simple. And I think it's just helpful to remember, just because something is simple does not mean it always feels easy. And just because something doesn't feel easy doesn't mean it's difficult. It just means that there's usually some stuff getting kicked up. All right, I love you all. Thank you for hanging with me. If any of you are interested in support with your content strategy, with your mindset around it, with your, as you're growing and scaling, that sustainability piece, but also that scaling piece, helping your team help you, any of those pieces, that is what I support clients with all day, every day. I love my work. I love my clients. I am full for June. July, I believe we're gonna have, we should at least have an intensive spot opening up. It'll depend on how clients are renewing. I think we will have an intensive spot opening up, and I think there will be a spot in July, and then everything else we're looking at is in August. So if you're interested in working with me, if that's something you've been curious about, book a call with me. They are super low pressure, but it's great to book a call now if you've been thinking about working with me later, so you can, get on the calendar before those spots fill up. All right, I love you all. I'll be back next week with another topic, and if you're watching on the replay, throw your questions at me.